first review the equipment we need in order to take a long exposure photograph. We need a camera, a tripod, an ND filter, a shutter remote, or a smartphone with the Canon Connect app. However, before carrying heavy equipment to the location, we will better learn about the weather. A non-rainy day is essential, and it will be perfect if the sky has few clouds moving quickly. I think the quad is a great place for shooting long exposure photographs, so I find a good angle and set up my tripod here. There are different ways of setting up the camera, but here's how I would like to do it. I first think about the exposure time of an ideal effect on my photograph. In terms of capturing the movement of the clouds, I would like my shutter speed set to about 3 to 5 minutes. However, since it will make the photo overexposed, the camera doesn't allow me to do so directly. What I need here is an ND filter. You could buy filters with different ND values, but I personally have an ND 1000 filter, which prolongs the exposure time by 1000 times. Therefore, if I attach the lens with the filter, the camera would only regard it as a photo with a shutter speed of 0.18 seconds. I then set my camera to Mode S, which is the shutter priority auto mode. This allows the camera to automatically adjust the aperture for the optimal exposure. Sometimes the aperture is too large and it may blur the background, and in order to resolve this, I could adjust my ISO. With a lower ISO, we could get a photo with less background blur. Using these settings, I now know the aperture and ISO I need to set in this environment. Yet, remember that my ultimate goal is to take a photo with 3 minutes exposure time, right? So for the next step, I'm switching the camera to a bulb mode. In this way, the camera will keep the shutter open until my finger releases the shutter button. Next, I set my ISO and aperture that I previously chosen here. The final picture would have the same lightning condition, but with the blurring effect of the moving object. Afterwards, I screw my ND filter onto the lens and attach the camera to the tripod plate. Finally, it is time for us to take the long exposure photograph. I could either hold the shutter button for 3 minutes or use the shutter remote or Canon smartphone app to hold the shutter open. However, the second method is more convenient, and I could get a photo with less shaking. Besides capturing the smearing effect of the clouds, we can be creative with long exposure in various ways. Here are some of my examples. You could show the busy pedestrians with an exposure time of about 5 seconds, or car trails at night with an exposure time of about 20 seconds. However, don't be constrained by the suggested exposure time given by others, because a long exposure photograph can be creative and fascinating with different exposure time. Keep trying with different shutter speeds and choose the one you like the most.